Discussion. We will go to Sue.
Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, we put out in our situational report, and I believe this is what Supervisor Wojcik was referencing, some information, a frequently asked question about the mask advisory. And certainly it was meant to answer the questions we've received, because we've gotten a lot of people wanting clarifications. So that was the intent of that. And of course, as I read it, it makes perfect sense. I'm not sure if it doesn't to others. Thank you so much to Dr. Hayes for speaking today. And what he described about mask usage is really what is recommended in the advisory for public spaces. And I hesitate to say use common sense, because that isn't always so common, but you know, if you're in a remote area, not around others, taking a walk by yourself in the neighborhood, you know, this advisory is not meant to say you should be wearing a mask then. It's just when you come within 6 feet of others. So I hope that clears up confusion. I don't know if you have further questions on that.
You go ahead now, Sue.
What did he say? Go ahead.
Go ahead, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, then you're wanting our update right now, right, Ken? Yeah. I'm going to let Dan, emergency manager, begin with some data. And then I'm going to talk about some data also, and some other things that are going on.
All right, briefly, morning, everyone. I'm just going to briefly touch on statewide, some numbers for you related to COVID today. Currently, the last 7-day trend, average cases statewide is 914 per day. Again, that's the average number per day over the last 7 days. To give that a point of reference, 7 days ago, that number was 890 cases per day. And 14 days ago, that number was 764 cases per day. As Dr. Hayes had indicated in his message, July was a big month for COVID. That is also evident around the state, as 41% of all positive cases have come from July alone, statewide. Anywhere from 5 to 10% over the last 14 days is the current positivity rate. So that's going to be number of positive tests as a percentage of total tests taken. So that has varied anywhere from 5 to 10% over the last 14 days. Currently, we have 38,633 cases that have recovered from COVID. And currently there are 9,873 active cases in the state as the latest data we have for COVID. Touching quickly on the Badger bounce back, we have a positive news under the hospital criteria. They continue to be 100% meeting their needs in terms of not needing to operate under crisis standards of care, which means they have enough space, enough staff, and enough supplies currently. That's statewide generally. The positive case count continues to be the main issue as it relates to that gating criteria through Badger bounce back, again, anywhere from 5 to 10% over the last 14 days. So Sue's going to touch on a few of the other things that you want to touch on the map now, Sue?
Sure.
The activity map. Okay, I'm going to share with my screen for a minute a map with you.
So what Dan is going to show us is on the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website. In previous meetings of Health and Human Service Committee as well as County Board, you've requested more data, and we're going to show you where to find some. And this is, the state has done a really nice job of providing recently county level data.
I'm having a hard time sharing.
We're having a hard time sharing. Maybe we're just going to talk about it.
We might.
Okay, so when you go to the, if you could bring up my document, that, yeah.
You want your document?
Yeah, if we could get there.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you go to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website, there are some metrics as far as burden and trajectory of disease, and they determine county by county what the COVID risk is. And we are at high risk, as well as most of the state. Oh, here we go. Are you able to share that, Dan?
Not yet.
No. Okay.
No. I just want to pull it for you so you have it.
Okay. There's another area where you can see a graph of cases by onset date. And I hope to share that with you simply because in the last few weeks, you would see how many cases we've gotten here by onset date, 2 to 3 a day, which is a lot for our county. To date, we've had 7 total hospitalizations out of the cases we have. Back up. As far as number of positive cases this morning, we are currently at 83. If you're an astute data person, you will notice that for the past few days, our number has not agreed with the state's. We've been trying to rectify that. I believe it's because there is a case in our Door County caseload that is actually an out-of-state case. It is marked as such, but the state has yet to process it. Currently, we have had 62 of those 83 cases. That means they have recovered from acute symptoms and are out of isolation. That does not speak to some of the long-term effects that Dr. Hayes was mentioning earlier. And we're still at 3 deaths. Now, Dan, if you wouldn't mind sharing, if you can, hopefully everyone can see this.
I can't share.
What?
I'm not able to share.
Oh, we're not able to share. Okay, sorry. We are looking at a nice graph of COVID cases by age in Door County. And for the 0 to 10 age group, we've had less than 5 cases. In the 11 to 20 age group, we've had 7 cases. 21 to 30, 10 cases. The 30-year-olds, we've had 12. We've had 9. The 60-year-olds, 17. So you can see that it's across the board, all ages are getting this. The 70-year-olds, 8 cases, and over 80, we've had less than 5 cases. So, and as Dr. Hayes talked about, from the beginning at the end of June until now, we have more than doubled our case count. Oh, now he's going to share. Okay. What's going on with that? Well, anecdotally in our follow-ups in general, it's that people are just moving around more, traveling, being more social, in contact with more people, more possible exposures. And often cases we interview know exactly in contact with COVID. They know of a contact of a confirmed case. Other times, and sometimes we find them when we do our contact tracing efforts, we find that they are symptomatic. Other times they've been to a general gathering of some sort. One of the common themes we've seen is gatherings of extended family, private parties or get-togethers at bars. There really isn't any one venue or situation or age group right now in Door County that's coming in contact with COVID. So at a previous meeting, one of the supervisors requested data on number of town cases we follow up with as far as and contact investigations related to cases that visited here from out of town. This data I was not able to pull from the state surveillance system because everything in the system is assigned to county of residence. The only way to track this data would be to ask my staff to keep a manual record or tally as they complete these cases. I do not today have that data, and at this point, I really am not inclined to ask my staff to do even one more thing. Our first priority is to follow up with active cases and do contact investigations to contain the virus and keep our community as safe as possible. Like others, we've been stretched from day one of this pandemic to keep up. And now with the recent surge in cases, it's been especially challenging. I'm just going to touch on a little bit of information about public health workings because my information to you on COVID response would not give a full picture if I didn't explain just a little bit. So early on, we enlisted the help of some staff from other health and human service divisions, some social workers. They were trained by public health staff in doing contact investigations and case follow-up. They were very helpful. And then a few weeks back, they all had to return to their normal duties, and are no longer able to help us. At this point, we have one LTE contact tracer, and we are looking to hire several more with our COVID funding that we have received for public health, which is separate from what the CARES funding that Ken discussed earlier. So this can't happen fast enough with the surge in cases. Of course, Joe Krebsbach and Kelly are working on this. I think there's an ad going out to the Pulse today, and it's going to be on the website. Could we have planned better? Perhaps, but I didn't have a reliable crystal ball. And throughout all of this pandemic is uncharted territory. I just want to point out that in addition to the regular COVID work, my staff has done a lot of training of the staff I just mentioned. We've even trained Joe and Corey in follow-up, and they have taken their turn at weekend on call, which has been very helpful. So we are definitely supported. We are normally a Monday through Friday operation. Obviously, for the last 3 to 4 months, we've been functioning 7 days a week. We need 2 staff each weekend to be on call, and we are salaried staff. Public health staff are brilliant, ambitious. It's a brilliant, ambitious group of young women, and I can't take any credit. They came this way. They're dedicated to public health and in the community and are excellent and have risen to the occasion. At present, they are also exhausted. The current situation is not sustainable for us, but as I said earlier, I'm encouraged because we're supported and we're hoping to get more staff on contact tracing. As the community has transitioned back more to normal activities, they're knocking on our door for our usual services, and we do need to transition back to that. WIC has continued along throughout all of this. So Teresa, our WIC director, is the only one really who has continued with her regular duties. Other than that, our work has been 99% COVID. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about testing in our county. Door County Medical Center is doing, by my estimation, 95% of the COVID testing for our county residents. Recently, they have begun providing testing in Sister Bay at NWTC site every Wednesday. They also provide testing at their Fish Creek Clinic. Last week, they let us know that they are at or perhaps over their maximum capacity for testing. Their main focus is testing of those who are symptomatic. They have also partnered with us and tested individuals, groups that we would like tested, even though they don't have symptoms, because we've identified them in our contact investigations as close contacts of concern. I am told that Door County Medical Center is getting many requests from the public for testing of asymptomatic people that they are simply not able to accommodate. There is consideration of having another National Guard testing event. That's something we're looking at. Of course, that's a temporary measure, a stopgap. Our other healthcare partners in Door County, Bellin is not doing any testing. Aurora is doing testing just at their urgent care clinic in Sturgeon Bay. And both myself and Brian Stevens from the hospital have spoken with those healthcare providers and encouraged them to expand their testing endeavors, but to date, they have not. And neither of them have plans to. Public Health continues to have regular meetings with the school group, that's school superintendents, school nurses, and Dr. Fogarty on school reopening plans. And just very simply to sum it up, schools have really huge challenges and need not only public health support, but the support and understanding of the entire community. I've had a number of conversations or meetings with individuals as well as groups. Met with the Sister Bay Advancement Association on Monday and the Egg Harbor Village Board last week regarding the large events they usually hold in those communities. Some of these events have been officially canceled. Egg Harbor canceled all their events for I believe it's the remainder of the year. As far as Sister Bay Fall Fest, looks like that's going to be canceled, but that's still pending and in process. That's really all I had to report on today.
Just really quick for the county board, when Sue was giving an update on the advisory, I wasn't trying to cut off any questions or debate. So I just wanted to do the full report. So if there's any questions, both on the reports, but also obviously the motion on the floor in terms of the advisory, please do so. I was not my intent. That get cross-run. So
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Sue, and your staff for all the hard work. I was hoping you could, especially since we weren't able to see the graphic representation, could you just repeat the breakdown by age of the positive cases in Door County? I would appreciate that. Thank you.
sure. Yeah, why don't you just try sharing it one more time?
Yeah, let's see if
I can try, yeah. It gives me an option to share file or share whiteboard. I don't see an option to share screen. Oh, I wonder if I can share it. Sue, let me try doing this once.
All right.
Stand by. Just
Well, while Dan is hopefully going to get us the picture on the screen, I'll just begin again. Group up to age 10, there's been less than 5 cases. 11 to 20-year-olds, there's been 7 cases. 21 to 30, there's been 10 cases. 31 to 40, 12 cases. 41 to 50, 9 cases. 51 to 60, 13 cases. 61 to 70-year-olds, 17 cases. 71 to 80-year-olds, 8 cases. And over age 80, we've had less than 5 cases.
Thank you for that. And I wonder if, because it's such a widespread and it isn't just in one category, it isn't just old, it isn't, if that's might not be helpful information to also put out on the weekly update or because then people can see. I mean, I guess the one thing that is obvious, like people in their 20s don't really care. They're in bars, cheek to jowl, there's no masking, and so when you see there's 10 cases, which is almost the average of all the groups, maybe that kind of messaging, when people see how evenly it's spread through the ages, that might help people think twice about how they want to proceed with things. Thanks.
Nissa?
Hopefully you can hear me. Sue, I just want to clarify. Last I knew, Aurora and Sturgeon Bay was not doing any COVID testing because I had to get it done for a hospital stay for my son. And his hospital stay was the 21st. And the only nearest place Aurora was doing it was the medical center in Brown County. Because I tried locally first.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as I know, Aurora and Sturgeon Bay is not doing any COVID testing. At least they weren't as of a week ago.
Okay.
Dave?
Of the people that find that they test positive that were here and leave the county and test positive someplace else, do you end up getting notification of that? That if they think that they got COVID in Door County?
Sure. So the way it works is if there's a visitor to our county and they would go home and test positive, if they were in Door County during their infectious period, so if they could have been contagious during their visit here, that health department notifies us, and they also let us know of the situations. So where there was close contacts. So, and then it is our responsibility to follow up with those close contacts that live in Door County.
And presumably that's based on the individual telling their health department that they were here in the first place.
Yes, that's how contact tracing works. Exactly.
Okay. And then I'm not Facebook, Twitter, none of that stuff. I intentionally avoid it. However, I heard something about a resort in the county that had an issue and was closed down.
So actually, I knew nothing about that until I read it on social media, and I believe it was some rental cottages. And it's appropriate that we knew nothing because obviously there were no close contacts of those cases, right? If they come to a cottage and keep to themselves and don't interact with people, going back home, then, you know, it's not, as Dr. Heiss talked about earlier, COVID is spread person to person, right? That's the main way it's spread. It can live on some surfaces. How do I want to say this? We do not get notification that extra cleaning needs to be done in situations such as that.
That'd be no different than a private cottage being rented out then.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Vinny?
Thank you for all of the work you've been doing with this. I want to say that every time because I know it's a tremendous amount. And I just wanted to get clarification on the point you were saying about not keeping track of the number of visitors that you get contact trace calls about. I just wasn't sure I understood what you said. Is it that we don't know the number of calls that come in, or it's hard to track how many different contacts they had in the county? I just didn't understand. Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, Vinny. Both. So the way we would have to track that is we'd have to mark down or report on a list manually. We got a call or an email from Ozaukee County and we need to follow up. And then it turns out there was, 7 people we contacted. We're just not inclined to do that at this point. We do the follow-ups, yes, but we don't track them. Or to date, we haven't. Everything is tracked for us on the Wisconsin Electronic Disease Surveillance System. But the problem with that is if it's not a case in our jurisdiction, such as what I just described, there would be no record of our activity on there. As far as that goes.
Thank you. One reason I was just checking is you will just keep telling us how the workload goes for that. If you're seeing the percentage of your contact tracing shifting to more of these out of county contacts, it just is useful to know if you need anything from that or for that. The second part of the question is, Dr. Heiss mentioned that testing is free. And I haven't had to inquire myself, but I have had people in my district that own businesses tell me that they've had to be paying for their employees to be tested. So I'm just trying to get the information out to business owners as to if it's free, where it's free, how they access that. Thank you.
So my understanding, and we'd have to check with the hospital billing department, is that when you go to their testing site, if you have insurance, they will bill it. But nothing is paid out of pocket because there are government programs to cover if you don't have insurance. So I'm not sure where that fits in with what you were describing.
Thank you. I just think it's helpful for business owners to know if their employees don't have health insurance, there's a way for them to be tested. So the cost doesn't impede testing that may be needed. Thank you.
Exactly, yeah.
Joel?
Yeah, Sue, my question is, out of all the positive cases that we've had in the county here, do you guys know if any of them, or maybe you can't say, have had underlying health conditions that contributed to anything potentially?
I missed the last part of that. Underlying health conditions that what?
Well, did the people that tested positive have other health conditions that could have, contributed to the fact that they died?
Yeah. Joel, I don't have hard and fast figures on that, but I know that, and this is maybe not helpful, some did and some didn't.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sue at this point? All right, Sue, thank you very much. Now to discuss the resolution that we have the motion and the second on the floor for, which was the declaration of the emergency advisory. Anybody have questions about the advisory itself? If not, we will go to the voter board. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Susan.
I guess this isn't really a question, but I think it's important that we support Sue's advisory by voting for this. She put it into effect, I want to say, last Thursday?
Wednesday or Thursday, yeah.
Okay. So whether or not we have a lot of evidence as to whether it's making a difference, I'm still seeing people write me and complaining because they are going in places where they don't feel safe. I don't have a sense of that. Maybe others do. I have to say that I agree with what Dale Vogel said earlier, which is that in the meantime, we should pass this today, but in the meantime, I would really like it if our administrator and our core council could be preparing some possible drafts of ordinance, because August, if it's like July, I don't know, we're going to need to do something more. So those are my comments.
Okay. Laura? Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, just want to clarify. So with this advisory, we are advising, and I just want to clarify with that language because I got two different messages. We're just clarifying that we're supporting our public health officer to wear a mask if you are not able to social or physically distance anywhere within 6 feet, correct? It's not that it's outdoors once you leave your house.
What we're voting to support is the emergency advisory that was issued last Wednesday.
Right. And yeah, and I can't pull that up in front of me when I'm on the phone. And just like I said or asked before, there was an email that got sent out, and I don't believe that it was that clear because I did receive questions on it. So but what I'm hearing on the floor from the doctor and from Sue, I understand that. I just want to make sure that what we're voting on, or if Grant has feedback to that it's not conflicting, a message in an email or an advisory. So I think it's just clear that we have that. And I know it is difficult because there is so many questions. But I just want to make sure that we're not advising, hey, you're outside, go put a face mask on. But as long as you're within social distancing, if you are not able to do that, then we're encouraging a face mask. Clear as mud?
Yes.
Great.
Sue, do you want to comment on that?
On page 171 package.
So I think I did comment on it before. It's not meant to require anything. It's, highly advised that you wear a mask when you're anywhere in public, indoors or outdoors, especially when you're.
So that's my question. That's what I'm getting at. And it's not a requirement. It is right now on the floor for our vote. Is supporting your excuse me one second, your advisory, but you just use that word that you would like us to support you saying to wear a mask indoors or outdoors. And I just want to be clear that this advisory, and like I said, I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I did read it when it was issued out, but the email that I received yesterday, and I can read that language of Q&A that was there. And I appreciate that. I think that's really great to have that communication and follow up. I just want to be clear that I'm not voting on something that's to recommend people wearing a face mask outside when they're not even within 6 feet of somebody. So that's where I'm at. And from so much feedback over the last several months of constituents is that, yes, that there's a big support of wanting to wear face masks, encouraging people to wear face masks, not a mandate, but definitely not outside when you're by yourself or you're with your immediate family. I just want to make sure that language doesn't conflict with the vote. So
I think you understand the intent of the advisory, Laura.
Great. Well, then I guess I just asked that we clarify what information has been put out for the Q&A on the email. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take this opportunity to mirror what a few other supervisors had mentioned, that I think it would behoove us to have a resolution drafted and in the wings, so we are prepared if things should get much worse. Obviously, I think everyone's aware that I think we should have already done that. But I was under the impression that was already in the works. We haven't discussed that yet, but after leaving Health and Human Services last week, I was under the impression that was being done from what Ken said. So if you can clarify that for me, that would be fantastic. I understand that's not specifically what we are voting on right now, but I think some clarification on that is in order.
Sure, what I stated at Public Health, and I think Grant also said at the last county board meeting, is that we're constantly monitoring both input from WCA, other counties in terms of their activities, and either other municipalities that are passing those items, and we're reviewing those. And again, should we need to draft an ordinance related to it, and maybe I should defer to Grant, but really it's going to come from what Sue would probably issue as an order, and then the order could follow up trying to match that order. But Grant, maybe you should take the expertise on that.
Just really quickly, I believe it was in May we passed and enacted an ordinance that drafted the authority of the local health officer under the statutes, and also the authority of the county board under the statutes into the Door County Code. And in terms of acting quickly, what would be envisioned and what is certainly set forth in the statutes, and by the fact we passed that ordinance in May, our code, is that the local health officer would put into place an order that could be done relatively quickly. Then that order would be reflected in action by the county board that would take place under the ordinance that we enacted in May. I can't honestly imagine a situation where the county board would be first to step up, or would step up if the local health officer wasn't on board. And you also have to remember the legal restrictions that are in place. Any order or ordinance that we put into place, we have to be reasonably certain that it's going to pass legal muster, and also that we have the ability to effectively enforce it. We had mentioned, I had talked about that at the last county board meeting. But what Ken said is essentially true. We're monitoring the situation, and if and when it is deemed appropriate to act, we'll move forward in accordance with the authority that is contained in the statutes and the code. It's not quite as simple as just drafting an ordinance. And I would point out, at least the last I looked, that while there are cities that have adopted ordinances, cities have more authority than county, and certainly operate under a different statutory scheme. The only county that has, to my knowledge, enacted a countywide ordinance is Dane County, and some of the other municipalities that have enacted ordinances don't have any enforcement mechanism or no penalty. And in my mind, that's a useless act. You want, because it's really the last step along the line. And what we're doing with this public health advisory is much like we do with code enforcement. We had general guidance documents. Now we have what is essentially an emergency advisory. And as we step back and take a look at this, there are areas in the county where that advisory is not being taken seriously, and we can do targeted enforcement measures, a targeted order, and that could be backed up by the county board. We do it. But remember, under the state Supreme Court's decision that impacted negatively the state's ability to act, it's fairly certain that an ordinance or a local health officer order that is broad in scope and in general application will have a tough time passing legal muster. So if we do get to the point where we're doing an order or we're doing ordinance, it's probably going to be fairly targeted. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or we can try to answer them.
Thank you, Grant. The other thing that we had discussed previously was messaging and what sort of measures we were going to be taking to put messaging out there, both for visitors and locals. There was talk of that being targeted specifically at visitors, so they would be aware of what our stance is as a county. And I think that this emergency advisory, falls into that and getting that word out there. So I would also ask that we get an update on where we are at on messaging. I went back and forth from Green Bay twice in the last few days, and I did see one electronic billboard. The message was not up very long. I'm a pretty quick reader, and I knew what it was because I was looking for it. But other than that, I haven't seen a whole lot additional messaging out there yet. Do we have a plan for messaging regarding this emergency advisory, or are there other things that are going to be put in place? Do we need to hire a marketing team? What needs to happen next?
Actually, that was part of the, and I don't remember when you came in, but that was actually part of the report on that educational campaign that I talked about. So we've done the Pulse ran its first ad. We got half-page ad that was in the Pulse this weekend. Plus, we're doing all their digital email campaign as far as educational. We have 3 billboards, 2 digital, 1 static. That's all part of that educational campaign. And we should have the 3 primary radio stations starting to run ads at the end of this week with that message. And we also have posters that are being done. And with each of those medias, except for the static side, we're able to update that message based off what we're trying to convey going across. And we are working both with the Visitors Bureau in terms of that messaging, plus they have an outside consulting firm helping with that messaging and putting that all together.
Okay, thank you. And what's the time frame?
It takes 5 to 10 days from when you start working with the media group before it gets there. Okay. So the electronic billboard was the first one, and that one has got 4 cycles on it. We have 2 of the 4, so it does flip because we know it's a short message. Yep. But it does take 5 to 10 days, and once you get through the end of this week, you'll start to see more of it hit both the airways, the radio, and the billboards.
Awesome, thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Sue. I wanted to raise my hand and then I remembered, oh, that's right, we've got a new procedure for doing this. So I didn't get my button pushed. You said we have 83 cases. Are those active cases or are those total cases from day one? What is that number? I didn't understand.
Sure. Those are total cases from day one. Currently, we have 16 active cases. So those are people that are still in isolation.
Okay. And are those all locals or some tourists?
Those are all people that reside in Door County. Okay. They could be people that are here, have a summer home, sure, but have a Door County address.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to qualify that because I watch the paper and I see it on the news at night. They keep reporting Door County always having all these cases. They never tell us how many have recovered. So now we have a more accurate number. Thank you for that. And the other thing is, I happened to be on a boat over the weekend, and the group I was with wanted to stop in at a local establishment. I won't say the name of it, but it's right on the shore. And I had to admit to my wife when I got home that even I was nervous, that I didn't want to stop there, and we didn't, because nobody had a mask. I looked over the shore, and there were people just thick. I didn't see one mask, and I was looking. And I have my glasses on, so I wouldn't be able to see it. So that, and I have to admit, even I was nervous about going into a group like that and sitting there. I just didn't want to do that. So I think this is a good resolution, and I think it should be passed.
Thank you. I agree. I think I would like to support this. And I appreciate Sue writing particularly all the items 1 through 4, but number 1 really very clearly and concisely spells out when it's recommended to wear a mask. And I think that that's a good, we didn't have that in our packet, but obviously it's available on the county website and it's there. And I think it is very clear about the 6 feet of distance, indoors or outdoors, depending on, if someone in your household. So I just, that when we're looking at voting on this, this is what we're voting on, is what was written in the document. So I think it's helpful to see it. Thank you.
Karen?
Hi, thank you. The one thing that I was just looking at with this is kind of what Supervisor Check was bringing up, and just that with the way that we were talking about it with Dr. Heiss was more of an open spaces. It's not recommended, but if you're within 6 feet. And so just after the discussion today, I guess I just wanted to know, is it something that we need to clarify a little bit? And I know that Q&A was out there, but do we have to reconcile that? Or is that, Sue, is this kind of still exactly as you want to keep it for your recommendation in advisory?
I'm sorry, Erin, I got lost in your question.
Okay, so just in the way that I read this now and after our discussion, it's like when in any public space. So to me, this is saying whenever you're outside, even alone, you should be wearing a mask is like number 1. And just after the discussion with the doctor and everyone, it seemed as though sometimes it's okay to not have the mask on when you're alone. So I guess I'm just wondering.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Right. The intent was not to say that that anywhere out in public, you should be wearing a mask. When you're anywhere out in public, you should consider whether you need a mask. And if you're, as I said earlier, doing an activity by yourself or with your family unit and you're not around others at a park or whatever, certainly it would not be expected that you wear a fabric face covering. This is kind of the advantage of an advisory rather than an order or an ordinance, because if we got into an order or an ordinance, we would really have to sort that all out. I've noticed that most ordinances just address, or the ones I've read anywhere, just address inside and don't touch those outside in situations. I wanted to include that in here because there are so many gatherings in Door County right now outside. I didn't want to say it was only inside. Certainly we know that outdoors is safer, but there is nothing to say that COVID is not spread outside.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, if not, it's time to go to the voter board. Please. That is passed on a vote of 20 yes, 1 absent. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Appreciate everything you're doing as always.
Well, thank you.
We're not forgetting Dan either.
We all thank you.
Also under pending business updates is the county administrative review process. We discussed this last month with Kelly. I did not receive any input as far as changing questions or process. Kelly did not receive any questions or input as far as process. Her and I sat down and reviewed it. So what we decided to do at this point in time is we're going to take the number of questions and cut them down to 4 or 5 key competency areas: communications, decision-making, leadership, financial management, and setting goals. Part of the setting goals part will be between the administrator, admin committee, and the county board. We'll come back to that goal setting piece. And we were going to do it in NeoGov, the county's evaluation software program. So what will happen is Kelly will put together the little software piece that needs to be put together. She'll send it out to everybody. Basically, we'll have about 2 weeks to provide the input and send it back. It will come only to me. It will not go to Kelly. I will be the only one that will be seeing and getting all the input, and that will come from supervisors and department heads. Outside constituents, however, will go to Kelly because of the contacts and relationships on that side. And then we'll need a little bit of time to create it. And as soon as it's created and the process is ready, we will send it out to everybody. And we will continue to move forward on the administrator's evaluation process. Okay. Resolutions 2020-56, approval of gift, grant, and or donation to the sheriff's office. Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve, please.
Second.
Discussion.
Go to the sheriff or the chief deputy for explanations there on the form.
This is what I would say.
Good morning, everyone. It's Sheriff Cernard. I have presented the request for equipment. I believe this will be the 4th meeting that I've presented. So basically what I had asked for originally was a helmet and a body protective shield, which I would classify as personal protective equipment. During the different meetings and throughout the last month and a half, I acknowledge and realize some people would consider that riot gear. I do believe the intent, I've said right from the beginning, is protective in nature. No way, shape, or form did I ever say that I wanted the equipment to be used against individuals. As the sheriff, I have a responsibility to make sure that our community stays safe and that we're prepared, and we're prepared properly based on the circumstances that are going on, not only in our community, but in surrounding communities and throughout the United States. So I don't want to go too deep into what's going on, because I do believe everybody is aware of the different things going on. Again, it was presented at public safety. It went through 5-2, I believe. Then it went to finance, where it basically tied, so it failed. After that, I was approached by the Adopt a Soldier organization, requesting to donate the money to purchase the protective gear that I felt was necessary. It's my understanding that the organization has donated the same amount to the Sturgeon Bay Police Department, and then smaller amounts to Gibraltar Police Department and Washington Island. Those 3 agencies, again, my understanding is they have accepted theirs. So at this point, I've been asked to compromise, and I believe that was at Finance Committee, which I'm fine doing, but I do believe we have an obligation to protect minimally our deputies if and when we should need them in a capacity if a situation goes bad. And as Mr. Spalding spoke, it really does put me in a bad spot. The community is split on the issue. I think people understand that we hope that it won't ever happen here, but they also understand the fact that we, being a smaller community, rely on the emergency police services program to work, and we have to be part of that. We can't keep saying no. It really puts me in a bad spot. I don't get to control time. I understand the timing of this was not maybe the best, but I became aware of the fact that we did not have that basic equipment. And in talking, you know, with the administrators previous to myself being sheriff, the other sheriffs previously did not have to worry about potential riots. They had other things to worry about, so that they made equipment purchases based on, again, what was going on in the world. So again, I think I've presented it. It's been presented at meetings. It's been presented both sides in the media, I think, pretty clearly. I'd rather probably answer questions that you may have, because I don't want to sit there and repeat stuff that many of you have already heard.
Thank you, Sheriff. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be voting against this donation of money, and this is not an issue that I have been taking lightly. I am proud to say I am part of 4 generations of public safety service to our communities in law enforcement and in the fire service. I take the health and well-being of public safety officers very seriously. I disagree that our officers, our law enforcement personnel, should be sent to other places to enforce civil unrest. Mutual aid for something like a tornado or a fire is not the same as civil unrest. That is the job of the National Guard. If all the sheriffs were like ours, I wouldn't be having this conversation. I really believe we have one of the best sheriffs around. Sheriff Cernard has proven herself to be progressive and moving the department and thus our community in the right direction. I also believe we're not going to solve a problem with the same tools that started the problem. And I also realized we are not going to solve the deeply ingrained institutional racism that is part and parcel of our society in this room or with this vote. We stand at the beginning of each of these meetings to aspire for liberty and justice for all, and we are far from there yet. I'm voting no on principle, and I'm disappointed that a veterans organization would be used as a funnel for political money. I see it as a political money to affect this purchase. We in Bailey's Harbor, just within the month, just mere days ago, a few weeks ago, we had a young man commit suicide who was a National Guardsman, not currently, but he had been. If this organization is truly about adopting soldiers, we have better things to do with money to help our veterans. Gearing up for the next battle, how is gearing up for the next battle more important than taking care of those who are hurting from the last one? Suicide and other issues are incredibly important issues that face our veterans, and I just feel like this is the wrong way to spend money, and for them to do an end around to donate money for this, I just can't agree with it. I will say too that, you know, just like, you know, I probably wouldn't be talking right now if all the sheriffs were like ours. I also probably wouldn't be talking right now if this was just for ballistic helmets. I totally get why we would want and need ballistic helmets for an active shooter event. The body shields I can't support. I will be voting no. Thank you.
Melissa?
I actually have 2 questions that are directed more towards Grant than anything. What are the legal possible ramifications of a government entity accepting money from a nonprofit organization? I mean, does that put us up to a possible legal issue?
No, none whatsoever. There is statutory authority for the county through the county board to accept gift donations from any entity. So there's no potential legal concern here based on the source of the funding.
Okay. My second question, and this is directly from the national website for Adopt a Soldier. You know, most people think of it as sending gifts to people who are active duty and overseas. But when it talks about when military returns, it says, after members of our military return home, the transition can be difficult. Organizations like Mission 22 is dedicated to healing America's veterans when they need it most right now. They offer treatment for post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, substance abuse, and all the issues veterans are facing today. So my question about that is, does that open them up to legal ramifications for not following their mission statement?
I'm not going to comment, and it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the legal ramifications of a donor. So I just don't have any basis to make an educated or informed opinion.
And I understand your priority is the county, but it's legitimately a concern of mine that there could be issues with, people who have donated to an organization and don't like where their money has gone because it doesn't follow what the mission statement appears to be.
Yes. Kara?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping that you guys will be able to hear this without getting defensive, but I'm going to urge you to vote against the donation. The acceptance of a donation of $10,000 for riot gear to be used by the Door County Sheriff's Department is the wrong choice, and it is in direct opposition of the demands of uprisings all across the nation calling for an end to police violence, particularly against Black and brown bodies. And there's statistics on incarceration rates based on race, and we know that if you are a Black man or child, you can expect to be murdered by the police at a rate of every 1 in 1,000. And we think that slavery ended with the 13th Amendment. That might have been what you were taught in school with Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. But Ava DuVernay's film, The 13th, taught me that slavery did not even officially end. And there's a line in the 13th Amendment that says it abolishes slavery except as punishment for crime. So white folks just rounded up Black folks and arrested them for minor infractions, putting them in prisons to do forced labor, and it's totally illegal. It does not make it moral, it is legal. And reparations were paid to slave owners and not to the actual people who the violence was committed against. And then even in 1951, after the age of lynching and all sorts of other things, there was a charge by Black Americans, a historic petition to the United Nations for relief from a crime of the United States government. They said, we charge genocide. And this was read all over the world, except not in the United States. And in it says, history has shown that the racist theory of government in the USA is not the private affair of Americans, but the concern of mankind everywhere. And it says the genocide of which we complain is as much a fact as gravity. The whole world knows of it. And it goes on to provide evidence to prove genocide committed by the United States. And part of this evidence is police violence against Black and brown bodies. So right now we have an increase in militarization of the police, and that's current, and it can't continue to be normalized. The militarization of the police is under critique all over the country, and we're poised to accept a donation from an organization that's supposed to help military in our country. It seems it's so ingrained in our perception, the connection between law enforcement and military, but it's not the right connection. So let me paint you a little bit of a picture, because we're in a pandemic. We're in COVID, right? Unemployment is already at an astounding number, like unseen. Schools and childcare are uncertain. We know that evictions will follow, foreclosures will follow. People experiencing homelessness is the next wave because of a federal government that has provided very, very little for everyday citizens and have bailed out corporations and entire industries. You guys know this. Billionaires are growing their wealth while people are struggling to pay their bills. And relief hasn't been big enough. It hasn't been courageous enough. It has not been aggressive or meaningful enough. It has not been enough, especially for marginalized communities. So even in our safe county, unemployment and homelessness will grow. And uprisings occur when there are no other options, when things have been at a breaking point for so long. And those uprisings do not need to be met with force or military. They need to be met with resources, and they need to be heard. Martin Luther King said a riot is the language of the unheard. Looting is an act of desperation and the reaction of a crisis. It's something that doesn't need to be met with military or force. So this resolution that we'll be voting on today states that this riot gear will be used to protect residents of our community. But this gear is supposed to intimidate, not de-escalate. This gear will be used against humans, against bodies, against us, Americans with rights, in order to protect property. We've made property more sacred than bodies. We're more outraged at property damage than the lynchings we've seen on video of Black lives. We think that destroying property is more violent than the outrageous violence of historic, current, systematic, and overt racism against Black and brown bodies. And we're trained to see buildings and windows being broken as more valuable than human beings who are demanding human rights. So I've gone on for a little bit, but so we know that we live in two Americas today, right? We still live in two Americas. It has not gone away. It's not a far away history. It's a very, very recent history. And slavery has just changed to our criminal justice system. So this is why this vote is so important. And the power that we have in this room, it might not change all of the wrongs that have been committed. It won't. And it might not reach very far, but it is a visible thing. We have the power in this room. Our power is budgetary. And I don't want you to give it up to preserve the status quo. Our job is not to defend the status quo. Communities all over are reimagining policing. They're innovating. There's communities that are saying, we're developing a group of unarmed people to do traffic violations so that people don't have armed people doing traffic violations. That's a community is doing that in California. There are places that are defunding the police by major amounts in reallocating funds. What we're doing now with this is not reimagining, it's not protecting. And you can think this everything that I've said is not an issue in our county or that it might not be needed, but it's so present. Racism is the violent force. It's not the protesters. It's a public health crisis. Police violence is a public health crisis just as much as COVID is a public health crisis. And one last thing that I'll leave you with is when Black Lives Matter, everyone lives better. When you have the most marginalized of people and you say they matter, then everyone else is raised up. So I really, really urge you to vote against the donation, and I think it's the wrong choice. Thank you very much.
Susan?
I'm going to offer a little bit of a different perspective, I think. I'm looking at this as a supervisor, not as somebody who's been active politically all my life. I do not dispute a lot of the historical stuff that Carl was talking about, because it's true. A lot of it is, and can't speak for everything. But I look at this in 3 points. Number one, I'm not pleased that an organization is trying to do an end run around the whole board. So that's a concern. My suggestion would be that an agenda item for the admin committee next month would be to look at our donations again and see, examine the ramifications of donations and how we handle them. So that would be my first thing. My second thing is that as a county board supervisor, I have a responsibility to our employees. I voted for the protective equipment at finance, and I'm going to vote for it today. I have known a lot of these deputies all my life. They went to school with my kids. They're members of our community. I think it's my job to keep them safe. That does not discount the fact that we have a community of a lot of people who are concerned about what's going on in our country. But I don't think it's any more fair to group our sheriff's department with the Minneapolis Police Department and many others without really knowing what we're talking about. And I commend the Public Safety Committee and the sheriff last month for putting 2 items on their agenda to discuss, to start to learn, to have the community conversation, because I think it's our job as supervisors and our citizens to look at our department and not just lump it with everybody else. See, how do we do business? And the Public Safety Committee learned about these mutual aid, the history of it and how they work. And they also learned about use of force policies in this county. And I would encourage them to continue this conversation. Maybe another time might be a conversation on what happens if we have a deputy that violates a procedure. How is discipline handled? There are a lot of topics that are being raised in our nation because we see terrible violations of human rights and how policing is done in lots of places. But I just think that as a supervisor, we got to look at the whole picture. And the whole picture is, yes, to learn about how our deputies do their jobs, look at policies, tweak those policies, rewrite those policies if necessary. Perhaps it needs to get broader and human services needs to look at. I mean, I don't believe that law enforcement has asked to become the mental health institution that our jails have become. That wasn't their choice. That's society's doing. And so maybe a conversation at Human Services could deal with what's the relationship between people with mental illnesses when the deputies have to interact or do wellness checks, whatever it might be. So this is a conversation that needs to come forward. It's important, but our control is over our department and our people. And I think we got to decide it based on looking at the local picture and making our decision.
Aaron?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a follow-up question from Supervisor Boltman, and I think probably our sheriff can actively answer this, but in terms of an active shooter right now, what kind of gear do you guys have for protective gear? And I guess I just wanted to get a little bit more up to speed as what we have, and Supervisor Boltman had recommended just the helmets instead of the shields, and so I just wanted a little history on that.
So right now, we do not have ballistic helmets other than individuals that are assigned to a specialty unit such as SWAT. As far as the shields, we have some similar shields that are in the department used on the correction side, but on the patrol side, we do not. So an active shooter, obviously based on our community and the makeup and the response time, any officer could arrive on scene prior to, the organized SWAT team to get there. So right now, again, when I was asked to compromise the last time, I came in with the least amount of equipment with a small amount of money as possible. And once we got asked to relook at that and compromise, and the other agencies, we found out they didn't have what they needed either. All the leaders met basically and said, well, if we are going to accept the money and we're going to purchase, let's purchase the ballistic helmets with the face shields. And as I said, I think in the finance committee, I understand compromise, and I'm not against that. But in my mind, these helmets would be a dual purpose. And again, in the end, there was no intent to, use a helmet against anybody. So when I hear the arguments of this equipment's going to be used against somebody, I still struggle visually. Like, how are you going to use a helmet that protects an officer's head against somebody? other than taking it off and swinging it at somebody. So I understand the shields, somebody could perceive that way, but the helmets, no. And honestly, I can tell you, I've probably had at least 1,000 conversations about this over the last 6 weeks. And in the end, nobody really cares about the helmets. They seem to be fine with that. It's the shield, but it's because they don't like what it looks like. And once I talk with people and explain how we would use them, not what you see on TV, not what's going on in a different, larger community, but how we would use them, how we would write policy, and how we would train them, most people have changed at least a little bit of their version of what they're seeing. And again, it's not a full riot gear setup, but that's what we're asking for. And really it's head protection, and it serves dual purpose. So.
Thank you, Tammy. Judy?
Thank you. I just want to thank the supervisors that have spoken for both sides of this. I've been more torn on this issue than many others we've faced. And I guess I would like some clarification as a beginning. What is the normal budgeting process for this? If we could review this, because I think it came to us with poor timing with what is going on in the nation, but it's not something that a sheriff would normally specifically have line itemized that we would approve for that. As I've seen in our budget processing, we could do that, but it isn't something normally we would trust that if a sheriff needs something as protective gear for the officers, that's part of her job. So if that could be clarified a little bit, that would help. Thank you.
Sure, I can give just a quick response to Tammy, come back to you, but in essence, it was not part of the budget. And again, it was this, when obviously Tammy's our new sheriff, and obviously there was incidents going on throughout the country. There were some discussions also too about what was potentially going to happen here in terms of organized events. From that standpoint, it was learned that we did not have that equipment. So then that's when Tammy reacted and said that's something that in her mind should be, when we discussed it both at public safety, and one thing that was mentioned at finance in terms of this having standardized listing of equipment. This is your sheriff, deputy, this is our standard equipment list, and putting that together and saying that. So Tammy, I'm not speaking for you, but when Tammy presented that would be considered standard equipment that's issued to officers. So that came forward as a special request to get that, because that traditionally, and again, what Tammy put together was the minimal request, and if there were other items she wanted to add on to that standard list of equipment, that was going to be built into the budget process for 2021 and handled that way. So again, if there's something that's unbudgeted, we bring it through the process of getting approval for that and have the expense carried that way. Otherwise, if it's built into the budget, again, they have like a standardized, equipment bars, uniforms, all that kind of stuff that's just built naturally into the budget. But again, just based off, and again, even I know the sheriff had mentioned it, just the timing, obviously because the events triggered all that, but that's also why I triggered it, because we didn't have that equipment. So again, it can be perceived as being unfortunate timing and that we're trying to ramp up, but it's personal equipment that way. But again, that's why they came forward that way, and that's why we're here today from that standpoint. But otherwise, it would be part of the budget process in terms of building it in that way.
Thank you. And the next part of my question is just clarifying what the intent of the Public Safety Committee was in passing it 5-2, and then what the intent of the Finance Committee was in having a tie vote. Because and we may not be able to answer this, but was the intent about the material itself or the spending of the dollars? And maybe we can't even know that now because those meetings have passed. But I think that there's a clarification with that too, because then that leads to Susan Cohout's point about accepting a donation for something that a committee did not want. Did they not want it because they didn't want the money spent on it, or they didn't want the materials themselves? I don't know the answer to that. Thank you.
Again, the only thing I can say is that each individual member could actually speak, but again, the discussion at public safety, I think, was similar to this in terms of whether or not we think we need it in terms of the reaction. At the Finance Committee, it was twofold. One, in terms of just the timing of the equipment itself, but then also procedurally in terms of not having it as a budgetary item, and can it be built into the budget process. So there's actually two parts of it. One was buying all the equipment up front, and then there was also a motion to amend it to a lesser amount to do the helmets and then just part of the shields to reduce it. again, that initial motion failed, and it went back for a vote, and then it was a tie, so then it got held up. So I think part of it was twofold. One is obviously the situation and where it's proper expenditures now, but also procedurally that it should have been built into the budget process that way. So.
Thank you. And I also wanted to comment on really appreciating the sheriff's departments and the officers for all the work they've done, excuse me, towards social justice before this was even an issue, such as de-escalation training, the treatment courts, rehabilitation programs in the jail system. I think these are all steps that the communities we're referring to outside of Door County are looking at as new ideas to address some of the things that are issues. And I don't disagree that they're issues at all. I just think that some credit needs to be given and looking at the local state of affairs and giving, just again, credit for those steps being taken before the current national kind of uprising that we're seeing. So I wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
I guess I just want to, make reference because I think some of you may have heard the presentation or seen it or not. But again, going back to my responsibility as the elected official is our community. And are there issues larger than our community? Absolutely. Anytime I've been asked to sit at any conversation, come to any meeting regarding any of those things, I've always been there. If I can't be, I send someone from my department. But I have to do what I feel is right. That's what people elected me to do. And this is a very, very split issue in our community. But again, if you look at the use of force report that we had for 2019, out of, and I don't have it in front of me, I think 8,000, almost 9,000 cases where deputies interacted with individuals in our community. And that's race, gender, everything, visitors, residents. They've only had to use force 7 times. And why? Because they have probably the best communication skills of any officers that I know, because they have to. Because at any given time, we only have 3 people working. So I think we do have to focus on what are we talking about locally, because your decision today is a local decision in my mind. Again, I have money in my budget. If I wanted to buy it, I could have bought it anyway, right? We've talked about this before. You guys give the sheriff's office a certain amount of money for equipment and supplies. I could have bought it and shifted. I didn't do it because it's the right thing to do is to be transparent. But you cannot be naive to say that it's never going to happen in Door County. None of you have a crystal ball, nor do I. If we did, we are in the wrong business. So I have to do what I feel is right as the elected official, top law enforcement officer in Door County. It is no different than a fire chief coming to you or Aaron from EMS coming to you and saying, from public safety, this is what we need. You may not personally like it. You may not personally like what it stands for. But in the end, you have an obligation, just as I do, to keep the men and women of the sheriff's office safe when we put them in circumstances that they could be at harm. There's a lot of equipment that people like and don't like. Again, it's how you use it, how you train, and applying it to our local environment. If I thought that we could not use it properly and we were going to use it violently against people when it wasn't a response that needs to happen, I wouldn't be in front of you asking for it. And I can't control what the next sheriff is going to do with the equipment or what 3 sheriffs before me did with the equipment that they bought. What I control as your sheriff is what we do today. And we do invest a lot in justice systems, all kinds of things. We've got juvenile justice, we've got treatment courts, we've got programs in our jail. So to say law enforcement isn't proactive and is abusive to people of our community, I am not going to stand there and let people say that. If you want to have a conversation about what we are doing, let's have that. You want to talk and have a conversation about what's going on outside of Door County, I'll be there. But I, as the leader, have an obligation to the community as a whole, not to one particular group or the other, and also the employees and their families that work for me. So we are being lumped in with a group of people that we're being accused, you're accusing us of the exact same thing. In the end, it's not riot gear. If you want to call it riot gear so it fits your narrative, I can't change that. I can tell you what I view it as. I can tell you we will have a policy on it. We will have training on it, and we will use it when it's appropriate and if it's appropriate. And again, I hope we never have to take it out. And as far as helping other agencies, that's my call. As the sheriff, that's my decision. The request comes to me, not to all of you. So if another law enforcement agency finds themselves in a position that they need assistance because all kinds of chaos is happening in their community, I don't care if it's Brown County, Fond du Lac, Madison, Milwaukee, Kewaunee County, I will and can send officers if I need to. And we have an obligation, and I say we, to give them the proper equipment that they need to be able to respond. On the other side, and then I will be done. We, and I will again say we as a community need to start having larger discussions, but you cannot just attack, because these issues that people keep bringing up have more to do with the community as a whole than what we are hired to do, what people elected me to do, and that is to protect the citizens of Door County and protect the officers doing that.
Thank you, Sheriff. Dave?
Thank you. I've had several conversations during this event with individuals that said, and I'm looking for either one of the sheriff's representatives to be able to answer me, that we've had the gear in the cars in the past. So it's just been a case of outdated equipment, was moved into the jail. I'm just wondering what occurred that gear either isn't available now or what occurred. And maybe they're misinterpreting what the gear was.
I'm sorry, Dave, are you trying to understand how we came to find that we didn't have it?
No, I had several people tell me that are retired from the various departments. There are people that interacted with the sheriff's deputies in the past, that there was helmets and the shield purchased in the past and used in the cars in the past. And apparently there isn't any now, or there simply wasn't, and there's a misunderstanding from the other individual.
So, to my knowledge, there's not really ever been any shields. We did have some helmets many years ago. My understanding is they potentially would have gotten those from 1033 program. Anybody that's in our administrative team right now wasn't here when they acquired those. So I'm not sure how they exactly got them, but I don't believe that they were ballistic. And previous lieutenants had made the decision to remove them from the vehicles. I'm not sure why. But there are a couple helmets that are left over, but unfortunately the pads have been stolen out of them. The straps are dry rotted, and they certainly wouldn't meet the proper guidance in a helmet today. So nobody other than SWAT carries them in their vehicle.
So one would be safe in saying that the rumors and conversations going out there right now about the older gear is somewhat misleading and misunderstood.
I would think that's a fair statement, yes.
I have no real issues with the gear equipment being purchased. I'm talking specifically in the procedural aspect. I'm not enthusiastic about how it came around. Supervisor Boltman and Quote said a number of different things I agree with as far as the use of the equipment, the procedures, the acquisition of the money. It seems to me like it is an end round, an effort. I'm not a sports person again, and whatever it might be, but the acceptance of free money simply because it's free money is not always the smartest thing in the world to do. And I'm not in favor of voting for this resolution as presented and as it's going through. I think personally it needs to go through the standard budget. She's already got the opportunity to acquire the gear if she wanted to through a normal budget. It doesn't deny that needs to be line item, and I will not be voting for this resolution as written. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to my previous comments. I think some time and energy from our county board beyond this subject should be spent on developing a social justice resolution. How that's worded, exactly what that means, I don't know, but we'll be looking with the legislative committee in the future to that. And I think that that addresses what Sheriff Cernard was mentioning about this being an issue in our nation, our country, our county, in a real local level and a broader spectrum than what's being presented with this donation. I also don't necessarily think we should accept a donation just because it is a donation. And that's why I was trying to follow what the intent of the committee was in voting it down, basically. So thank you.
I just keep hearing a discrepancy in like, this is going to be you, or it's to protect our community, but then we're also focusing on it going to other counties to be used against their citizens, which I've seen videos of in Brown County. And so there's that paradox where it seems like we're saying one thing and then in the very next statement, we're saying that it is going to be, used. It's not going to be used against citizens, but we're going to use it against citizens in other counties. So I just keep hearing that discrepancy. And I also want to state that if I know it's not like you don't take a helmet off and throw it at someone, but they're meant to intimidate. And that's one thing. So I feel like law enforcement is already armed to the teeth with all sorts of, gadgets and tools and weapons and stuff like that. And it just doesn't seem right to keep saying that it's to protect our deputies and to like make it seem like they are in such great harm right now that we need to protect them and we're doing something terrible by not voting for this, when there's not been a need except for when it was a need from Brown County so far. So I understand that this gets people really defensive, and I want to make it known that I'm not being critical of our sheriff's department. I think it's the system that I'm being critical of, and I can keep those things separate. I think Sheriff Cernard is like, I would vote for her again and again, but I don't want to keep having to like say that. I want to be able to be critical and dissent without it being a personal attack. So I don't feel like it's a personal attack, and I just want to make that known. I feel like it's just something that I'm passionate about as well as she's passionate about. So thank you for that extra time.
I don't have a speak button to push up here, so I'm going to push my own button at the moment. Make my comment. I have two things to say about this. First of all, it does disturb me. I echo Supervisor Hennikel's comments. It seems to me that we have two committees, one voted for it, one voted against it. And now we have an outside entity that comes in and offers the money to purchase it. That's kind of an end around the committee process, if you will. Okay. That being said, we do have a number of other groups that make donations routinely and regularly. We have Friends of the Park program. We have other groups that routinely donate money, and we accept their grants and accept their money for various things. I would have preferred to see this go through the regular budgetary process. I also would have preferred that it be brought up to the county board.
Yes.
However, that being said, I also have to agree with the sheriff. Sheriff does a great job. We have a great sheriff's department. We have great policing throughout the county. I do believe, and I would have voted for the equipment that had come up through the county board previously. And it does bother me the way that you could say it's an end around, although I don't believe that's the intent of the organization. But personally, I will go along and support the sheriff with their equipment and the accept of the donation, because I think overall we need to support them first so they can support our entire community. What? Okay, so Megan would be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is something that I have supported and have voted for twice on Public Safety Committee for those reasons that I want to be able to protect our staff. And I trust the judgment of our sheriff. That is not to take away from anything that the other supervisors have stated that they have concerns around. I have those concerns as well. The only, and I've spoken on this enough, but I do have one other question, because I'm mirroring that feeling of ick, that there may have been a go around, or that we are accepting money specifically for this, and that is how it would pass through. I would love any sort of help from the sheriff on understanding in a very transparent manner how this came to be, how this came to pass. If you can share with us, did they contact us? Were there conversations happening in the background? What I understand that our sheriff can make the decision to have this in the budget, and I do feel like protective helmets especially are something that our police officers should have. But I would like to understand more about how that came about. Sheriff, if you're able to expound on that.
Yeah, certainly. After it was the idea was presented at public safety, the first time, people from both sides of the issue started contacting me. Some against, some in support. Then I began receiving, when it failed at finance, I began receiving inquiries through phone calls saying, how do we donate? So Jill now and Ken can contest. The grant donations policy is mucky at best, I think. So basically all I did when people called about asking about donating is, here's the policy, and if you have any questions, contact Jill. And not only this organization, but other individuals have asked how they can donate. So what I do is share the current procedure. I didn't go out and advocate for people behind the scenes to come up with the money. I mean, when I left finance, if I have to budget for it, then I'll budget for it. But I think the important thing is these are individuals in your community that you represent as well that think they should have it. So I don't control what age nonprofits or individuals, as far as that goes, donates for whatever. As I think Ken said, our donation policy in the county is quite wide. I mean, what if you're not a friend personally of the park? Should you not take a park donation? I think it's a slippery slope. Do you guys maybe should you have a better policy on grants, donations, and gifts? Yeah, maybe. But right now you don't. So I did not go out and advocate. I didn't do a fundraiser. I'm not selling donuts on the corner. People actually reached out to me, and they want to do what they can to help protect the officers in their community. I tried to stay very neutral on it because obviously it's a controversial thing, but I think it is fair to know and understand that there is two sides. And if the community members want to do something to support their law enforcement or firefighters or EMS, in the past, we've never, ever told people they couldn't do that. Whether they want to have a brat fry in order for you to get a defibrillator, whatever, the county board has never stepped in and said, no, we don't want it. We don't think a defib is necessary. So no, we can't take the money from the brat fry. I think it's a slippery slope, but I certainly did not go out and advocate for people to give us money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was the second on the motion to approve this resolution. And for some of you that are going to vote against this, you're probably going to say that I'm biased. Because first of all, I returned from the Vietnam War. I was there to help protect this nation. And then I chose to apply at the Sheriff Department to continue to protect. And I got hired there. And I can tell you, the sheriff back then, he was very prejudicial on wanting to hire people that had been in the military. And if you read the second paragraph of the Adopt a Soldier, their mission is to serve the local veterans. Well, if you read on, many of those local veterans are police officers. I can tell you when I was on the sheriff department, and I was there 30 years, most of us were veterans that returned and chose to continue to protect the people. This money is to be used to protect their officers. How would you like to go to a rioting crowd where they're throwing bricks and not have a proper helmet on your head? It's to protect you. It's not what you're saying. It's a thing of force against the protesters. It's to protect you physically. I can't imagine that you want to vote against this. Where the heck are you people? And if you want to say I'm biased because I was an officer for 30 years, well, then call me biased. But I am definitely going to vote for this, and all of us should be voting for this. Thank you.
I don't care what anybody says, Biz, you're 100% on. Absolutely, and I may be out of line here, but absolutely
you're out of order.
right.
See, Kyle.
Who else was there?
You're wrong to say something like that. Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Oh,
All right, stop. Dave.
Not to get emotional, but remember, not the entire department is a soldier or retired. There are just as many percentage-wise in this company that are current or retired individuals from the military services. That this $10,000 could also do a better job at serving their quality of life, given the fact that we have a budgetary capability to pay for this through a normal procedure. Thank you.
Todd? Yeah, I don't know if we can make this thing work. We ended probably a little bit.
Certainly, as we said, and listened to all this, I was hoping to stay quiet, and I probably should, but not to make the meeting go any longer, but obviously there's a lot of motion around this. There's no question about this, but I view this as a very, very simple subject, and that's support the police department. These guys go out there every day. When they come to a riot, if they're ordered to go to a riot, somebody's calling for them to go there. They're not volunteering to get bricks thrown at them. They're not volunteering to do this kind of stuff. Hopefully we never have this in our county, but I resoundingly, unquestionably will be voting yes, and I think it's absolutely unconditionally the right thing to do, and it's a show of support, no different than we sit here and support the public health nurse and others through different problems and issues that they have. Our police department, I think, is one of the best, and I think this vote is less about the small things that we're talking about today, and it's more about the support for the police department. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Vinnie?
I want to agree with that. I think that as county board members, we have employees, and I think those employees shouldn't be sent into a potentially dangerous situation without the protective equipment. Whether we agree with why the situation arose or how it's handled, our sheriff's department has an excellent track record of how situations like this are handled. Sheriff Cernard mentioned to me that when there were protests happening in Sturgeon Bay, she specifically met ahead of time with the protesters to come up with a plan that would help that to remain a peaceful situation, which is just one more example of a way that our department goes above and beyond to have the intent of free speech be forwarded through in the process. So to prevent violent riots from happening by doing the legwork ahead of time to support social justice and to support open communication skills and to support de-escalation, to me is much more important. And I feel a way I can support that is by providing protective gear for those officers in the same sense that someone wears a bicycle helmet when they're riding their bicycle. I can't imagine having officers in a situation where they can't protect their own body. So as much as I'm on either side of riot gear itself, I wouldn't want it to be used against people, but I think it's fair that it protects officers when they are being paid to protect people. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
I too was gonna stay quiet because I think this is a very simple issue, but I lived in Milwaukee for 20 years. I was blocked from several outbreaks of riots. It's a reality. Stuff can happen. I've seen it happen. I was afraid for myself and my family, and luckily we had our police in Milwaukee who were there and were protected. We are not immune from violence in Door County. Stuff happens, and if we're not prepared to protect our officers, I think this is the very least we can do and face the realities of the way our world is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's time to vote. That is passed on a vote of 16 yes, 4 no, and 1 absent. Thank you. We're going to take a brief 10-minute recess and come back and finish up.
Mr. Chairman?